But will it have been worth it to have lost your life here for this cause?
I have a choice to keep silent and to allow the extremists to do what they are doing, or I have a choice to stand up and say this is wrong and I'm going to try and save my country. And I have taken the second choice. I hope God will protect me, but at the end of the day, I can't keep quiet when there's a threat to take over my country.
Bhutto believed that threat came from the same Islamic extremists who are now suspected of having a hand in her death, Lester.
She did not seem like a woman afraid. And Ann, we're joined here by our colleague Richard Engel, our Mideast Bureau Chief, who's here in New York on the holidays. You both have seen how accessible, in fact, the last time you two were together was in Islamabad. You saw how accessible she was then. Was there a sense that it was inevitable that it was going to end this way for Benazir Bhutto?
She certainly took a lot of risks, and when I heard the news, I was not surprised at all. She had to go out in these public rallies. This is election season right now, and because of her alliance in the past and because of her alliance with the United States in particular, she needed to galvanize public support. So in a degree, she took a lot of risks, but she probably had to do them.
And I overheard you guys talking. You talked about this at the time.
We did. We got together. We were looking
Not
at each
surprised.
other, and we were saying, you know, my goodness, I mean, the risk she's taking, and then she insists on being here and staying here, even after that first suicide attack on October 18th.
What happened today was what they failed to do in October. That time, there was just a suicide bomber who attacked her armored convoy. This time, the gunman rushed up, fired shots at her, made sure she was dead, and then detonated the suicide device. So they didn't want to make any mistakes this time.
That's right. And the Pakistan government, she said, told her of more than one attempt on her life that was being planned after that attack. So she knew there was a constant threat, not just in one city, but in cities that she was planning to go. Someone was getting the intelligence, she said, of what her plans were.
And Richard, let me ask, you've spent a lot of time in that part of the world. We saw some of the protests immediately after today aimed at Musharraf. Does this blow back on him at some point, and to what extent?
It certainly does, and it casts the entire political situation into turmoil. After months of martial law and questions about the elections, the process seemed to be back on track with the elections coming up very soon. Now all of that is in question. New calls for boycotts, talk about potentially postponing the elections, questions, did Musharraf put enough security on the ground? Benazir Bhutto's supporters said that he never did. So it certainly casts a lot of questions about the political
And
turmoil.
for the U.S., the issue here is a stable government in the fight against al-Qaeda. And she was rather unabashedly pro-U.S. on that front.
She was very pro-U.S. and she was extremely pro-democracy. She was very firm and very angry at the Musharraf government for imposing martial law. And in fact, it strained their relations dramatically. She also did something very interesting. Even before she went back to Pakistan, she named 3 high-ranking members of the Musharraf government and said, not the government, but these high-ranking members of the government had ties to some of these extremists that trouble the United States government.
Well, good conversation. And we'll see you tomorrow morning on Today. Richard, good to have you here in New York. Thanks so much. The crisis in Pakistan reverberated all the way to Iowa today, with just 7 days until the Iowa caucuses. The assassination is what the presidential candidates were talking about as they campaigned for votes. NBC's Lee Cowan is on the ground in Des Moines for us again tonight.
I may need some of this.
With every speech on the stump today,
We have all heard with great alarm and concern the reports of additional tragedy in Pakistan.
there was a new preface
A terrible incident for Pakistan, a terrible incident for the world.
as candidates rushed to offer the nation's condolences. John Edwards said he even reached Pervez Musharraf by phone.
It's very important under these circumstances, these kind of times, for America to show both strength and principle.
The political calculations, though, started early, with conventional wisdom hinting that candidates who've been touting experience would look better in light of an international crisis.
I know the players, I know the individuals, and I know how best way to address this situation.
And few have talked terrorism more than Rudolph Giuliani.
America feels a strong sense of, I think, connection to something like this because of what's happened to us.
But on experience, there were 2 distinctly different takes. Hillary Clinton claimed hands-on experience was important.
I have known Benazir Bhutto for a dozen years, and I knew her as a leader.
While Barack Obama charged such relationships didn't stop Washington from diverting its attention from Pakistan to Iraq instead.
that the real gamble in this election is playing the same Washington game with the same Washington players and expecting a different result.
Just what result this will have on the election, it's still too early to tell, but one thing's already changed. Questions about foreign policy are back, and not just about Iraq anymore. Lee Cowan, NBC News, Des Moines.
Back now with the latest on our top story, the assassination of former Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto by an attacker who shot her at close range and then blew himself up and killed at least 20 other people. Now Pakistan and the world are preparing for Mrs. Bhutto's funeral tomorrow. All of which brings us to some final thoughts on this tonight from our veteran NBC correspondent Jim Maceda, who has covered Pakistan and the region for more than 20 years. He's in our London bureau tonight. And Jim, what's been going through your mind as you've watched the events unfold in Pakistan today?
Well, Lester, in trying to look forward now, I can't help but look back, really. It was a couple of months ago in Rawalpindi. You recall that Benazir Bhutto was placed under house arrest to prevent her and her party from having a major political rally, like the one today, in a popular place called Liaquat Bag Park. Well, I went with a crew. We got through waves of riot police and barricades to try to gauge reaction at the park, but we never got there. The police kept us about a half a mile away. There were reports of a suicide bomber in the area, that we were prime targets, so we left. That was November 9th. Fast forward to today, Benazir Bhutto finally gets her rally in the very same park and is killed by a suicide bomber. You can almost hear Pervez Musharraf saying, "I told you so." So what's next? Most likely, Pervez Musharraf will continue his crackdown on political rallies, on liberties, on protests, basically on democracy, and all of that in the name of heightened security and Musharraf's war on terror.
All right, Jim Maceda, thanks so much. We'll have a lot more on this coming up tomorrow morning on Today. That's our broadcast for this Thursday night. Thanks for being with us. I'm Lester Holt. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow evening. Good night.